Most of what's on these slides are quotes from either the beginning part or the chapter 1 on vision. And I just wanted to go through them kind of slowly. There are some pages where there are inquiry questions, and we'll pause for those. And Prentis is, if you're not familiar with their history, they are therapists. They have the Embodiment Institute, which has a somatic healing focus. They work with transformational characters, and that's part of the work that happens in the practice ground. So this is their work, the healing in a very much of a societal community context. Underneath our current reality is a future waiting to be conjured. I don't think healing begins where we think it does, in our doing something. I believe it begins in a place of potential, where possibilities reside, visions for ourselves and for the world that can make us more whole. This very much is not a personal healing, although personal healing is at the foundation of it. With our visions in place, we can realize them through what follows, our commitment and the steps we take towards them. A lot of times when we're thinking about the future, we're visioning something, we're pretty much following from what's happened before. And they're saying here, the factor that makes our projections most accurate is the ability to anticipate new relationships, unexpected alliances, and possibilities. You don't have to go along with the status quo and just kind of project into the future based on what's already been happening. And I think that's one of the ways that a lot of people fall into despair. It's like things have gotten worse and worse and worse, for instance, with the environment. And how is it ever going to get any better? So we tend to get into that feeling of powerlessness. And they're saying that's not actually the way it works. And then back to this strong political foundation. Be careful believing your life can be your own. For some of us, our visions are a threat to order. The Prentis is Black and very familiar with and speaks very deeply and intelligently about structural racism. They were part of Black Lives Matter. They really have a strong, clear view and an unapologetic view of this is who I am. So that's the theme of this vision, chapter 1, is I can be who I am. Harriet Tubman, I think everyone is probably familiar with her, the Underground Railroad. And in the beginning of the book, Prentis talks about how she was in a classroom early on, and I think she was in grade 3 or 4 or something. And people were learning about the Civil War era, and they could all become a character. And she chose Harriet Tubman. It was a predominantly white class that she was in. And just how Harriet Tubman's story called everything into question about the dominant culture, the white privilege, the white supremacy, that culture that we live in. And as a Black girl in that culture, what was her experience? And reading about Harriet and learning more about her than the little bit that they learned about in class, she says it disrupted all notions that I had to accept any of this order as fact. That Harriet Tubman lived in the shadows and cracks of that world, traversing and widening them until something broke open. If she had found a way to make her body free, I knew that I could too. And notice how that feels in your body right now. Prentis is a good writer, and when she writes about that, you can really feel what it was that they were experiencing. And then the work with the Embodiment Institute and with Black Lives Matter and with all of the ways that Prentis works in the world now, this is the work she does. How can she trust her dreaming and how she committed deeply enough to stay the course? So Harriet Tubman was not somebody who was usual in her time. It was a time of slavery. It was very dangerous what she was doing, and yet she continued to do it. So how is it that that happened for Harriet Tubman? And then how can we lift ourselves into that possibility of that in this day and age? It is vulnerable and hard to let ourselves desire beyond what we can trust will be fulfilled. Again, we're pointing to this. What are our dreams for our life right now and for the future? Perhaps it is time to dream new dreams. When we're holding ourselves back, when we're not able to imagine something that's so different from what we have right now, then we hold ourselves into this container of the world as it is now, Maybe we're making it a little bit more equal, a little bit better for people, but it's basically the same. So when we feel this longing in our bodies, she says, I wasn't sure if fulfillment was for people like me. Let's pause here and do some inquiry. If you want, you can close your eyes, you could journal, you could move around, whatever is most comfortable for you. Let yourself feel it in your body and then listen. What do you yearn to feel or do in the world? What makes your stomach jump just to say it? Maybe it's not very practical. Let's take a minute here to really feel into that. Do you shut down what is not likely to happen? And how does that happen? Is it the inner critic? Is it that you don't even have the dreams come up? If you didn't have to be practical and you could dream a new dream for your life, for culture, for our society, for the people around us that we care about, the people we don't even know, if you didn't have to be practical, what comes forward? And maybe it's that you don't see it as a possibility for you to accomplish or to work towards a vision that somebody else is already working with. There are a lot of people that are perhaps already feeling into that and working into what it is that we would love to do. It might be that I wasn't sure fulfillment was for people like me. For many reasons, we don't feel like we're qualified. Or it might be that the dreams that you see around us are not big enough. Like, what would that big enough be? What is your dream? What do you yearn to feel or do in the world? And then keeping that in the back of the mind, we come into one of the reasons that our dreams are so small. Trauma can take the capacity for longing, for visioning from us. It's impossible to imagine we can shape what comes. We just are moving through life. It might be too painful to even imagine something that could be different. Certainly, we want to stay away from traumatic memory about the past. So, these are a couple of quotes from chapter 1. This first one is from Prentis. I want to know how to love. I want to be able to give love, show the love I feel, and I want to let it in when someone says they love me back. Very personal vision. From a colleague, I want to know that I am worthy and that I can inspire the people I work with to believe in their own worthiness. Moving from this big global vision to our own personal life, what are your unseen, unnamed longings? Stay connected in your body and in this moment in time, even though we're envisioning, stay here too. Notice what's happening here in your whole body and your heart. What are your unseen, unnamed longings? And you might be a long ways already on that path. Might not be something that's brand new. When we dream from the seat of ourselves, we come into relationship with one another and have visions for a more reciprocal and balanced world. We need visions within that make our stomach quiver and cause us to come alive. So we're moving from this very personal vision to moving out more into relationship again, into the world. In my experience, if we are in a regulated nervous system, we're not in fight, flight, freeze, fawn. We're not in a survival response. We are just naturally kinder, present, authentic. This happens naturally as we're moving out into the world. Reshape the contours of our community and rework the structures of our world. And I think this is probably something that a lot of us can relate to, this feeling of overwhelm and chaos, that we are at the end, we are out of resources, nothing left to dream. And Prentis is saying, no, listen for the calls of what is not yet here, but is waiting just in the wings. Maybe it's waiting in the wings because we've been putting it aside, saying, no, that's not possible. Or I'm not the person for that. Or who do I think I am? Which is probably leftover conditioning from childhood. If you were to pick something that you were just working with over the last little bit, name your vision, say them out loud if you can, if you're in an environment to do that. Say them out loud to bring them into being. Whatever that is for you, say it out loud if you can. You might not have the perfect words. You can kind of work with the words a little bit. And as we're working with that, moving into now, how do we actually bring these visions into the world? Commitment is what gets us through the middle of change when the outcome seems bleak. Commitment expects our despair, but doesn't waver. We can expect resistance when we're trying to change the world. There are a lot of people with a vested interest in keeping things just as they are. So how are we going to stay the course? These inquiry questions: to what and to whom are you committed? What do you long for? And what is worth traveling through the unknown to reach? Let's sit with that for a bit. Sit in your body, notice your breath, sensations, energy. What is worth traveling through the unknown to reach? Notice how it feels in your body. We don't have to have a full plan. We're just feeling into this in our heart. What am I committed to? Who am I committed to? Clearly, we should be committed to ourselves. And who else? Who else is in this circle of, this is my vision right now for my life? Who is involved with that? How am I engaging with that? What's going to keep me going when I get discouraged? Let's give that a few minutes to sit with that. If there wasn't anything in your way, what is your vision to the world, for yourself, for others, your community? This can be very specific. I want for every person to know that we're safe here in this moment, that we're grounded in the earth, that we can go into the forest and connect with a tree. Or I want for all children to have access to music. It could be very specific, or it could be very big, very general. What is your vision? What are you committed to? What would you love to see in your own life? And who is on that journey with you? Or who might be? Who could you commit to? Keeping these big visions in mind and in our hearts and in our bodies can be very powerful. It can be inspiring and scary. And yet, what are we here for if we're not here to live a life that causes us to quiver in our belly? So, that possibility allows us to live such a deeper, richer life, and one that really means something to us and means something in the world as well. Just to let that simmer inside as we move forward into the day. What is worth traveling through the unknown to reach? This is Prentis Hemphill's book, What It Takes to Heal: How Transforming Ourselves Can Change the World. And there's a podcast that just came out, Becoming the People is Prentis's new podcast. Our friend Adrienne Marie Brown talked about the book, and it was really delightful to listen to that podcast. So if you haven't yet, go to wherever you get your podcasts and listen to the podcast if you have a chance. And they were talking quite a bit about the first chapter as well, this vision. How can we vision the world that we want to come into being?